The number one thing I want you to know is if you call yourself a Christian, and I don't know if you're a Christian or not. If you're not a Christian, I want you to know that Sandals is a safe place for you to learn about what traditional Christians believe, to learn about what the Christian scriptures speak of, and to learn how Jesus Christ calls us to live our lives as Christians. But if you call yourself a Christian, as a Christian, we have an obligation to share my faith. I have an obligation. Now, we don't like that word in English, right? We use it in a negative sense. Well, that was an obligatory, gift or an obligatory kiss, like when you kiss your grandma, like, and you don't want to do it. But obligations are good things. The dictionary defines obligation as something that binds us. We're bound to something morally or legally. Like when you get married, you are under obligation to care for that person. You have made a legal bond. You have said, I do. I'm going to do these things. I'm going to stay with you. And if you're a Christian, not only do you have a legal bond, but now you have a moral and a spiritual bond. You are under obligation. A lot of us, especially those of us who are young, we shun obligations. Like, I want to be free. But I want you to know that a person that is under no obligations oftentimes is obligated to everyone and everything. You see, obligations are a beautiful thing that direct you because you're compelled to do them. I have to get these things done. I have to make these things happen. Obligations are beautiful things. I'm obligated to my wife. I made a commitment to God, to her father, who's in heaven now, to my parents, to her mother, who's still here with us, to our family and friends, right? I made a commitment. I'm obligated to her. I'm obligated to our kids. I don't always want to be, but I'm obligated to our kids. I'm obligated to our church family. Like, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. I care for this church. Outside of my biological family, my spiritual family is the most important thing that I have. I'm obligated. And as a Christian, I'm obligated to lost people. I'm obligated to people that don't know Jesus. I'm obligated to share the gospel. Paul says, I am under obligation both to Greeks and to barbarians. The Apostle Paul, if he was writing this today, he would say, I'm under obligation to Democrats and Republicans. Wouldn't that be interesting? He's willing to cross over, ethnic bounds, political bounds. He doesn't care how you philosophically disagree. He doesn't care how you see the world. He wants you to see Jesus. And he says, I am obligated to people that are different from me, to Greeks and to barbarians. Okay, now if you're on Facebook, you need to pay attention to this line, both to the wise and to the fools. Many of you keep arguing with foolish people. What does that make you? It doesn't make you wise. Right? You've got to learn to be under an obligation to people. Some people are wise, some people are not. And it's not helpful when somebody's not wise to call them foolish. Right? That doesn't make anybody feel better. He's under an obligation to people who are educated and uneducated. He's under obligation to people who get it and don't get it. But I want you to know this, that you have an obligation to those closest to you. Who are those people? Some of you have never shared the gospel with your mom and your dad. You've never sat down with your mom and your dad and you love them so much. You care for them so much. You've never shared the gospel with them. You've never told them about your faith in Jesus. Some of you are married to a non-believer and you come to church every week alone, but you've never sat down and you said, here's why I believe in Jesus. Here's what Jesus has done for me. Some of you are terrified to share the gospel with your children because they think it's out of date or it's out of touch. And you're afraid of maybe they'll not only reject the gospel, but they'll reject you. We are under an obligation to share the gospel with the people that are closest to us. Closest to us. You don't need me to share the gospel. They need to hear it from you, somebody who cares about them. That's where they need to hear it. Who are those people in your life? So many of you, you're scared to death that God's going to send you to Africa. God might send you to Thanksgiving dinner next year with something to share, something to say. So as a Christian, I'm under the obligation to share the gospel. It's why we gather together as a church. Some of you don't understand the vision of 500. You don't get it. It makes no sense to you because maybe you are not yet aware of your obligation to share the gospel. Some of you, well, why can't we just be about our church? Because when it's just our church, it's not his gospel.